And welcome back to the show. Robin Hood is New York City's largest poverty-fighting organization. For over 30 years, they found, fueling, and creating the most impactful and scalable solutions to lift families out of poverty in New York City. They partner with over 250 not-for-profits to support food, housing, education, legal services, workforce development, and much more to New Yorkers who are living in poverty across New York City's 5 boroughs. Robin Hood recently announced the Power Fund's inaugural cohort of Power Fund leaders who share Robin Hood's mission of increasing mobility from poverty. The Power Fund is a new initiative to fund and elevate nonprofit leaders of color who share in Robin Hood's mission of increasing mobility from poverty while addressing the interplay of racial justice and economic justice through their work. Here now to provide more information about Robin Hood is the Chief Partnerships and Impact Officer of Robin Hood, Samantha Tweedy. We're also joined by the co-founder and CEO at America on Tech, Jessica Santana, and then the co-founder and president at America on Tech, Evin Robinson, and we welcome you all to the show. I want to ask the question, if you will, share with me, and I think I'll start with Samantha. When we talk about poverty in New York City, I know that it's a big issue, and talk about your work in the fight against poverty.
Absolutely. So first, just thank you so much for having us here today. Thrilled to share a little bit about Robin Hood's work and then also our new initiative, the Power Fund. As you shared, Robin Hood has been supporting organizations across New York City for over 3 decades, looking for those organizations that are most effective at addressing poverty's causes and poverty's consequences. And in everything we do, we're driven by the data and the research to make sure that we're landing on those solutions that are most effective. And the research really had red flashing alarm lights around a really troubling fact. It's actually almost hard to believe, but over the past 2 decades, while philanthropic giving across the board has skyrocketed, gone up by about 400%, philanthropic giving to organizations led by leaders of color has stayed flat at just 10%. Now, not only is this just yet more evidence of the systemic racism that plagues our country, it also just doesn't make sense, right? Philanthropy is in the business of solving problems. So for Robin Hood, that's fighting poverty. And what we know is that it's leaders who have the expertise and the perspective that comes from being of the communities they're serving who are going to drive those solutions. If you've lived it, you know it. And leaders of color with the right level of investment and support, we know are going to bring about the most change in the poverty fight, yes, and across the board. And so through the Power Fund, we're making this concerted effort to identify and to fund and to invest in organizations who are led by people of color and in the leaders themselves. And that's why I'm so thrilled not only to have announced our first group of Power Fund leaders just last week, but also to be joined by Jessica and Evin today, who are 2 of those tremendous leaders.
Yeah. So Jessica, Evin, the opportunity to talk to you for a quick second. Talk to us, and I'll start first with ladies first, Jessica, about your involvement.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share about our work at America on Tech, but also really happy to be here representing the inaugural class of leaders that are representative of the Robin Hood Foundation's Power Fund. America on Tech is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to decrease the economic and racial wealth gap in underestimated communities by creating pathways to degrees and or careers in technology for students. We do this work by providing tuition-free technology education, training, internships, and job placement into really high-paying and high growth growth careers in the technology industry. I myself am from Brooklyn, New York, and really excited to say that, even though we're on BronxNet, but very excited be very excited to be representative of the first class of leaders for the Robin Hood Foundation, and happy to continue doing the work that we're doing at America on Tech.
Evin, a little bit about you.
And pretty much similar as Jessica Santana. Jessica Santana's co-partner, co-founder, Evin Floyd Robinson. I'm also a fellow Brooklynite. And similar to Jessica, we went through the public school system in New York City, K through 12. First in our family to go off to, in our immediate families to go off to college. And then after college, we both went into the technology industry where we worked prior to starting America on Tech. And America on Tech was basically funded out of a call to action to really, provide technical education, professional development, mentorship, but most importantly, job placement and new wages for the students that we're serving throughout New York City.
Yeah. And so as you talk about these initiatives that you've got going on, I want to take a moment and talk a little bit about the initiatives to fight against poverty, right? Because those are huge and poverty is big. And as we continue to see after COVID, these numbers are going to continue to rise. I mean, I think if we had a problem before, it literally looks like we're going to have even more of a problem. But you guys are really trying to grab the bull by the horns here and address some initiatives to actually deal with the fight against poverty. So take a moment and share.
Absolutely. So exactly as you said, things before COVID were already stark. So Robin Hood runs a data study with Columbia University called the Poverty Tracker that studies families over time. And what the Poverty Tracker data told us before COVID was that almost 50% of New Yorkers have experienced poverty over the last 4 years, almost 50% in a city that is deemed one of the wealthiest in the world. And so what that tells us is that the solutions that we're looking for have to be solutions that are going to make long-term change, that are not just going to get families right over the line, but that are going to get families in a place where they're able to stay out of poverty. And with COVID, we've seen that exacerbated. And again, COVID, which was so often hailed at the beginning as the great equalizer, right? The pandemic that was hitting us all, we saw that that has been completely untrue, that Black and Latinx New Yorkers across the country are dying at twice the rate. And when we look at the economic impacts, we're seeing that while unemployment rates are high for all, the projections show that for Black New Yorkers, for example, they're 10% higher. And so the kind of poverty solutions that we want to invest in are those that are going to make the difference for the long run. And for us, that means that we're making sure we're taking race into account. You can't fight poverty and be colorblind. The solutions that we know work, for example, a college degree, which is so often heralded as that golden ticket, sure, it increases lifetime earnings by $1 million. But what we also know is that that is not the case, depending on what racial background you are, that we see that folks who are white, who are looking for employment are oftentimes able to get the same jobs being recently released from prison as Black Americans with no criminal justice history. And so what we're really seeking to do with the Power Fund, but across the board, is make sure that we're thinking about that interplay of racial injustice and economic injustice in our work and in the work of the organizations we fund. And we think that America on Tech is just such a key example of that, because we know that those will be the solutions that work for communities and work for communities for the long run.
And so Evin and Jessica, talk to me about being a part of an organization that, listen, you're minorities and you're leading, the importance of leading in a time like this, and the importance of having minorities lead at a time like this.
I think it's really important for us to understand that laws, a lot of times when you look at programs and products and services that are being developed to solve root causes of poverty, a lot of times the folks who are at that table are not representative of the communities that they're trying to serve. And I think we're at a time where we're seeing how much of disadvantage that is. And as a result of that, I think that what there's a lot of power in being from the community, being representative of the community, and then also designing with the community in the process of developing programs like ours. America on Tech is an organization that recognizes that computing and technology jobs are the #1 sources of wages in the United States. And we also recognize that Blacks and Latinos specifically are severely left out of spaces of innovation. As someone who is from Brooklyn, New York, who transitioned from the public school system, who was first generation in her family to graduate from school, get a job in technology, I know what it's like, and I know what the trials and tribulations I personally needed to face in order to get to that point in my career where I was able to obtain a high-paying job in the industry. And as a result of that, when we're thinking about the products and the programs and the solutions that we're developing at America on Tech, I can hone in uniquely on the things that make my experiences authentic in a way that creates an intersectional experience for students that merges strong career development, that merges tech skills development, but also takes into account who they are as people, the identities that they come with, and also the challenges that they face.
So I think Jessica hit the answer right on the head. Essentially, Jessica and I live by a model of we were once the students we now serve. And this really comes from a real life lived experience of us being similar to the students that we now work with. We went through the public school system, we navigated going through the public school system to college, and then ultimately into the technology industry. So a lot of the decisions that we make are not only sourced through industry knowledge, but also lived experiences that Jessica and I went through firsthand growing up in New York City.
Samantha, talk to me about this because here you have this great organization that you're able to fund and really be able to assist to get to the next level. But I think we talked about a little bit earlier that when it comes to, communities of color, when it comes to the philanthropic dollar, it doesn't always hit. How do you feel like this is going to make it such a difference with community impact?
Absolutely. So I think it's really two things. The first is just recognizing that leadership matters. If we want to drive systemic change, it's about investing in who's at the table, who's making decisions, and making sure that we're setting folks up to do that for the long run. So that while this Robinhood investment is in America on Tech, it's also in Jessica and Evin, who, as you've seen today, are not only phenomenally leading their organization, but are already phenomenally leading their communities, and we know will for decades to come. The second piece is about being really open and transparent for all of us about the evolution that we're going through so that we can all learn and change together. This philanthropic data isn't about one institution. It's not about one foundation. It's not just about Robinhood. It's about a sector. And let's be real, it's reflective of our country. And so the more that all of us are able to lean in this moment of long overdue national reckoning around racial injustice to make the kind of change that we are going to, in partnership, be able to drive for the long run is what's going to make the difference, I think, for communities for good.
And Evin, Jessica, talk to me about this, having, the support, having somebody actually seed and sow into your business and your vision. What does it mean to be able to have that extra push, to have that philanthropic edge and support that sometimes, as we say, doesn't always happen. But in your case, you guys are, afforded this opportunity.
Well, one, we feel really grateful, both on a personal level and at the organizational level. The fact that this fund is investing in the whole model of what it takes to actually, really grow and scale an organization, it says a lot to the foundation's approach to wanting to ensure that they're not just giving a grant to an organization and not actually investing in the leadership that organization is going to require in order to take it to that next level. The second thing I'll say is so often as a leader of color in this space, you're always having to try and prove the worth of your work and making sure that you are proving the worth of your impact, but also having to prove that as a leader, you actually can do this work. And so what I think that this grant and I think what this partnership is doing for us as an organization and even as leaders is signaling to other people that there is a model to success in order for us to be able to work collaboratively in order to solve some of our city's largest problems. And I think that the Power Fund in and of itself is a model of success that I hope that the nonprofit sector, both locally in New York City and just nationally, are able to adopt so that other leaders of color can have access to those same opportunities.
Yeah, and I would just jump in and say that we're extremely happy and honored to be part of the Robinhood family now. Jessica and I, for the last 6 years, have done some tremendous work, and then now we're happy and looking forward to the impact that we'll collectively all make together as America on Tech and Robinhood, particularly under the Power Fund.
Yeah. So Samantha, I think people out there are asking the question, how did they become a part of the Robinhood family? What's needed and what's necessary?
So one of the big shifts for us with the Power Fund has been to make sure that we are just looking everywhere for leaders and organizations like Jessica and Evin and America on Tech. We know that the number one barrier that faces leaders of color is just that networking barrier, that just like how life works in every area, it's who you know, it's who gets the phone call when someone picks up the phone to ask for who do you know who does X, Y, or Z. And so what we're being really intentional about is ensuring that we are just getting in conversation with organizations that are doing the most phenomenal work around addressing that intersection of racial injustice and economic injustice in our work so that we're able to fund and to fuel those leaders on the front lines.
And so for more information, how do people get connected with all of you guys? I want to take the time to do that right now. So Evin and Jessica, America on Tech, how do people get connected?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to go to americaontech.org. You can also follow us on social media, on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, all at America on Tech.
And similarly, come visit us at robinhood.org. There is a full page about the Power Fund, everything from the research that fueled the work to highlighting the tremendous leaders in this first inaugural group.
Anyone add anything before we close our segment?
Just make sure to follow us all. We're looking for, definitely looking forward to making the impact across New York City. As mentioned, and I think you probably heard it very well during this interview, this is something that of us, and we're just looking forward to continue to fight the good fight here in New York.
Just echo with it with a big thank you. One of our other Power Fund leaders shared with us that from her perspective, leaders of color being able to tell our own stories about our communities, the needs, the work we do, and the solutions is a critical part of racial justice. And I think that's true. And so just want to say thank you to you for giving the opportunity to share the work and for elevating all of our voices as we move it forward.
Yeah, what we want to do is create a platform that we can elevate voices and be able to share and to bring people who are actually making a difference. And sometimes they don't always get that exposure. It's, our privilege and our honor to be able to do that. Samantha, I'll ask you one more question before we get out of here. You talked about the research that was done. Was there anything in the research that actually surprised you with the findings?
I think it really was the data that I shared about that 50%. If you look at any data on poverty in New York City, it's generally snapshot data. And what it tells you is that about 19% of New Yorkers are experiencing poverty. And yet you just look over 4 years and see that it's 50% of our city who has spent at least a year in poverty. And it's not only remarkable because it's striking data, it's remarkable because it reshifts the kinds of solutions you need to focus on. It shifts who you imagine when you think about the face of poverty, when you think about the state of poverty. And it really pushes you to understand that we have to change policies. We have to change systems, in addition to supporting direct service and organizations on the front lines, if we're going to see real change.
I want to thank you all for joining us for the Social Justice Forum. Really a great opportunity to hear some great work that's going on. America on Tech, an introduction there, Robinhood, the Power Fund, great work. Thank you guys for coming and sharing with us here on the Social Justice Forum.
Thank you for having
us. Thank you so much.
All righty. And we want you to stay with us. We do have more show. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more coming up right after this.